some of the strengths of the bus before before Jackson killed him?
Didn't Biddle play kill it too? Hold it all alone.
Well, Biddle was trying to get money by calling in loans. Who's he trying to get money back from? He's trying to get the bus's money back into the bus. Can you say that Biddle is probably responsible for this? Absolutely. Absolutely.
So he's trying to save it.
I don't even know if he's trying to save it so much as screw over Jackson, but yeah. The way that he went about saving it definitely hurt it. Remember, it was going to go away in 1836 anyway because Jackson vetoed the rechartering of it. So this was more, sort of vendetta against two different ideologies. That's a question. So what are some of the strengths? Well, number one, it did reduce bank failures. In fact, did you say I did a map about bank failures in the 1920s? I do. Those aren't there. Here we go. During the actual Great Depression, you can see the little bar graphs down here. You see where it says 4,000? You see this big bar right here? Those are the number of banks that failed in the year 1933. Now, obviously, this is 100 years before that. My point is, before we got really good bank regulation, we had tons of bank failures. Okay? Now, we did have the Federal Reserve by this time, although it was not employed very effectively. But with no bus, banks become highly unstable. Now, in big cities, you might have banks that were exceedingly wealthy, and because of that, they were more stable. But Western banks were inherently unstable. One, they didn't have very much money. Two, they were loaning to people that were not necessarily able to pay it back. And number three, they got robbed a lot. Right? So, the bus was a really sound organization that reduced bank failures, and it's going to go away. And that's going to help hurt our economy in the long run. Number two, it was able to issue paper currency that was backed. Some small banks, like some pet banks, would actually make their own paper currency. And it would be the currency for like a small little area. But was that very valuable currency? No, it wasn't, because it was backed by a small bank.
What's that?
Like, for instance, our Federal Reserve, you have a $1, like I have a, do I have a dollar bill? Yes. And my lottery ticket. If I win $70 million. So in cash after taxes, that's like $30 million.
Can I have 20% of a piece of it?
You should pay for my college education if you win the lottery.
I'll tell you what, if I win it, I'll pay for your college education.
And you got me a
Nobody else. Nope, you lost it. Sorry, she asked
I
first.
asked a card.
Only, by the way, if you go somewhere really cheap. Not
What
go
if
for
I
I.
go to France?
What if you go to
I'll pay.
Okay.
On this dollar bill, you can see it says Federal Reserve Note. The Federal Reserve Note. Alright, now, for a long time, we were on something called the gold standard. Have you ever heard something called the gold standard? That our government backed every dollar by gold. So every dollar that was issued was backed by gold. So you knew it was worth something.
Yeah.
Alright, we don't actually back it up by gold anymore, but the government issues these, and it's backed by the legitimacy of the currency, right? This is the only currency you can use in America. You can't bring in, doubloons or, seashells and things like that, right? This is what Americans use as legal tender. At this time on the West, different type of things could be used that would be not as stable or reliable. The bus actually issued dollar type of currency that was universally accepted. Does that make sense? You couldn't use pet bank money in New York, right? But you could use bus money in the West.
So it just meant it was once.
It means that it was universally accepted and it was backed by, alright? It was also a safe place to put the federal money, right? After this, the federal government's not going to have as safe a place for a couple of years to put their money. And all of these are really big deals. Okay. Now, are there any questions about the bus? Any bus questions? Any bus questions? JC.
What was Clay's scene with
Remember, his scheme was, when was the bus's second charter was 1816 to 1836. But in the election of 1832, he wanted to make it a campaign issue, so he brought up a bill to recharter the bus. That way Jackson would either have to veto it and hurt the economy, or pass it and alienate all of his supporters. This was kind of like, didn't Jackson kind of do this to John Quincy Adams, right, with the tariff abominations? By the way, how did both of those things work out for our country? Horribly, right? One of the things that Jackson is credited for is the common man democracy. Not necessarily he started it, that he was part of it, but he also is seen as being horrible for our economy at that time because of the Panic of 1837. Okay, other questions about the bus? No questions? No questions? No? Okay. I don't know if anybody actually watches this around the world and just sees how ridiculous this is. Right?
So we get 7 views. So
Do what?
There's 7 views on most of them. So like 3 students are out and 4 random people around the world.
Yeah, maybe so, or maybe me 4 times. Yeah, most of them don't have. My econ ones have lots of views. These have no views because they're just made for you guys. Okie dokie. Now let's talk about general incorporation laws. Nothing cooler than general incorporation laws. All right. Let's say that Jack Douglas private investigation. Let's say that Jack Douglas wants to start his own private investigation firm. Would you want to do that?
I can see.
Of course you would. He'd be awesome at it. All right. So he started his own PI firm, right? Jack Douglas PI. How awesome is that, by the way? You're going to hit so many chicks with that, right? Give him a business card. All right.
I've never seen.
So anyway, Jack starts his business, and there's 2 ways he can do it. Either you can start it just your regular business, or he can become a corporation. Now, many of you who had government econ last year with me, you remember that one thing that businesses always worry about is liability. Remember I was talking about liability? Right? And one way to get around liability is to do what? Do you remember from last year? Do what? Well, to form a corporation, right? There are plenty of small little corporations. I mean, there are corporations that have one person, like Jack Douglas Private Investigation, right? What you're doing is, like, let's say that Jack Douglas PI firm is not incorporated, and I walk into his firm and there's a banana peel on the floor, and I slip and I bust my head. To be fair, I don't know why banana peels are always slippery in movies and stuff, but let's say that they are. He is completely liable for anything that happens to me. In fact, your personal stuff, your house, your car, your wife's diamonds, whatever, right? I can take all that crap. If he's incorporated, Jack Douglas Incorporated, now who can I sue? I sue the company. Your own personal possessions are not sued. A company is essentially held the same legal side as a human. Does that make sense? So while your company can be sued, your stuff can't be sued. For instance, today we have corporations where you can buy shares of stock. Some corporations, actually all corporations have shares of stock. Most corporations, are most corporations sold on the New York Public Stock Exchange or not? No, just a teeny tiny minority are. Most, like Jack Douglas, can start his own PI firm and he can be the sole shareholder, right? And all corporations have shares of stock that if they want to issue, they can. So if you want to get some more money, that you want to, let's say, buy some cool gadgets and expand and get some cars and some night vision goggles and hire some employees, you need capital up front, right? Well, one way you can get capital is by selling shares of his Jack Douglas Private Investigation firm. There are some firms, have you ever heard of a guy named Warren Buffett before? Warren Buffett, for a long time, was the second richest guy in the world, right behind Bill Gates. He's American. He's an investor. And his corporation is called Berkshire Hathaway. Do you know how much it's not sold on the New York Stock Exchange, I don't think. Do you know how much one share of Berkshire Hathaway costs? Like, you know, McDonald's costs, $30 or whatever. You know how much one share of Berkshire Hathaway costs? about $43,000 per share. And he owns, by the way, like 1 million shares or something ridiculous of that. Yeah, I mean, this guy's a baller. He's actually given away almost all of his money in province to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I think he's promised to give them $30 or $40 billion. It is awesome. He's a pretty great guy. In fact, he lives in the same ranch house he's lived in. He's from Omaha. He lives in Nebraska. He lives in the same ranch house that he always has. He goes like the same dive steak restaurant. He also advocates for way higher taxes for rich people.
He's a lovely person.
He is a lovely person. But yeah, he actually gets taxed at a smaller rate than his secretary does. He actually, as a percentage, pays less percentage of taxes than I pay, percent-wise. The ultra wealthy pay a very small percentage of taxes. And he argues, along with Bill Gates, that that's probably a bad thing. But that's where we're at right now. Okay. Why do you think, this is one thing Jackson did, why do you think Jackson wants to encourage people to form corporations and encourage laws to be made so people can form corporations more easily?
So he's once again siding with the economy and helping out and trying to figure out.
Well, if people can easily form corporations to limit their liability, what will people start to do? They'll start businesses, right? And if people start their own business, isn't that good for local economies? The whole purpose behind his general corporation laws is so people begin to not worry about liability and they can start their own business. When I was a senior in college, I worked for a flower shop. I delivered flowers. And it was, this woman owned it, and she had like 2 part-time employees and a couple of delivery guys, were just college guys. And she was incorporated. I mean, she had a very small little business, but she was incorporated. Why was she incorporated?
Because if they got hurt.
Yeah, if something happened in their business, or if I rammed somebody delivering flowers, then she wasn't sued, her business was. Does that make sense? So there you go.
What's the downside though? Like, why is not every thing incorporated?
Well, there really are a lot of downsides in terms of limiting your liability. I mean, if you have a business that just, you're going to have a hard time getting sued, right? Like if I cut your grass or something like that. But there are people who argue, and this is a reasonable argument, that as corporations have gotten bigger and stronger, them being treated like an individual citizen has given them too much power. For example, now the Supreme Court has decided that money equals speech, and since corporations have lots of money, they can spend all the money they want on campaign advertising because it's free speech. And what that's done is it's given corporations a hugely powerful voice in elections. So that's a downside. Okay, this actually comes to fruition in the Charles River Bridge decision. Does anyone know the Charles River, where it goes through? You know where Charles River is?
Charles.
Yes, it's in the state of Charles. What city? It's a big city. Does anyone not know?
Charles.
Boston. I didn't know. I thought everybody. Okay. Do what? I didn't hear. Speak up. I can't hear you. That German row back there. I really can't understand a word you guys say. All right. I'm lumping JC with that. She looks more Irish. All right. We didn't panic. Tomorrow we'll panic. Stop the thing. All right. You can probably see we went.